Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 24th of June. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. Just 6 days before the deadline for the signing of a nuclear deal between Tehran and six world powers, Iran's parliament and supreme leader have thrown down the gauntlet that could derail the agreement. Legislators passed a bill banning access to all military sites and their nation's scientists by International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors. The decision follows the declaration from Ayatollah Ali Khamenei that the issue is one of the Islamic Republic's red lines. In a live radio broadcast, he also rejected the P5+1 demand that all sensitive atomic work be suspended for at least a decade and insisted that all sanctions be lifted the minute any final pact is signed. Britain, France, Germany, China, Russia, and the U.S. have been calling on Iran to cooperate with investigation into allegations it has been working to develop nuclear warheads rather than the peaceful energy program that it claims. Khamenei went on to accuse the United States of wanting to destroy Iran's nuclear industry altogether. The IDF carried out an airstrike in the Gaza Strip against a rocket launcher used by terrorists just hours before to fire at Israel last night. Remnants of the Palestinian missile were located in an open field adjacent to Kibbutz Yad Mordechai. An extremist terrorist group in the Hamas-run enclave claimed responsibility for the attack. The same Salafists affiliated with the Islamic State claimed credit for previous launchings at Israel. The Army's coordinator of government activities in the territories, Major General Yoav Mordechai, has decided to cancel permits for Gazans to enter the country for Muslim prayers in Jerusalem on Friday out of concern for their safety, he explained, because the area around Gaza has again become dangerous. Police have arrested a number of suspects involved in the lynching of wounded Syrians transported in an IDF ambulance in the north 2 days ago. At this moment, senior leaders are meeting with the heads of the Druze community in an effort to tone down the tensions. We get more from IBA's Aryeh O'Sullivan.
The Prime Minister promised and the police acted quickly. 5 residents of the Golan Heights Druze village of Majd el-Shams and 4 from Khorfish in the Galilee have been arrested by police for attacking army ambulances on Monday. The 5 from Majd el-Shams were reportedly spearheading the mob that assaulted an IDF ambulance carrying casualties from the Syrian civil war to hospitals in Israel. 1 was killed and another severely beaten. An army investigation is looking into the possibility that the Druze protesters may have been tipped off by a soldier. The investigation also revealed that at least 10 servicemen tried to prevent the beatings and even fired into the air, but were unable to contain the mob. 2 troops were treated for injuries. In the other incident in Khorfish, the mob wasn't able to stop the ambulance, which escaped with Syrian casualties. The suspects were brought to court today, where their remands were extended. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called on the Druze to calm things down and not take the law into their own hands. The army said it would continue treating Syrian victims of the civil war. An urgent meeting was held last night by the security services to decide just how to deal with the latest outbreak of violence by the Druze, a highly sensitive issue. Netanyahu is expected to meet today with Druze leader Sheikh Melfak Tarif. Also participating is Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon and IDF Chief of General Staff Gadi Eisenkot and Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan and Police Commissioner Yohanan Danino. Druze leaders gathered in the Galilee and strongly condemned the attack. Some fear it may have doomed their Druze brethren in Syria.
It was a crime that took place in my place and in my village and by my people. I feel very shy that innocents were killed by a lynch. The Israelis carry the responsibility of that because they have to protect the civilians in their army armored cars. But I do believe that it will not happen again, and people will understand the position that they took for themselves. They don't protect anyone. They will cause they will harm the Druze society in Syria.
But Druze in Israel and the Golan Heights are still inflamed by rumors that hundreds of wounded Syrians treated here belong to jihadi rebel groups fighting the Druze in Syria. Tribal sensitivities are testing national loyalties, as Druze in Israel want to see Israel help protect the Syrian Druze who are loyal to President Bashar Assad in the civil war.
We are not calling the Israeli state to be involved in Syria, but we are looking for the international community, support by Israel, to stop the ISIS and the other terror activities and the others who are against the innocent people in Syria, especially in the Druze mountain.
Israel has said it would prevent the massacre of Syrian Druze and has reportedly started to prepare plans for mass evacuation into the Golan by Druze refugees if necessary. Ari O'Sullivan for IBA News.
The United Nations Human Rights Council is set to discuss its report on last summer's conflict in Gaza next Monday and may vote to send it to the Security Council for further action. According to a State Department spokesman, Washington is rejecting the document because of the UNHRC bias against Israel and will not be a part of that process.
Well, right, we just got it yesterday. Certainly we're reading it. But as I also said yesterday, we challenge the very mechanism which created it. So we're not going to have a readout of this. We're not going to have a rebuttal to it. We're certainly going to read it, as we read all UN reports. But we challenge the very foundation upon which this report was written. And we don't believe that there's a call or need for any further Security Council work on this.
In that case, let me just
okay, go ahead.
In that case, I take it that you reject using this report in any referral to the international community.
We do not support any further UN, work on this report.
You just welcomed a similar effort for Korea. You just welcomed a UN human rights inquiry effort for Korea. Why would you sort of reject something
because we've long said, and that we reject the basis under which this particular commission of inquiry was established because of the very clear bias against Israel in it.
The president of the Christian Israeli Public Action Campaign, Richard Hellman, says that CPAC is working to debunk the UNHRC Commission of Inquiry into the alleged Israeli human rights violations during the Gaza offensive. Hellman is in the country on a solidarity mission and joins me now in the studio. Hi, thank you for coming in.
My pleasure.
All right, let's actually start with how does CPAC relate to criticism of the Obama administration as set forth by the former Israeli ambassador to Washington, Michael Oren, in his new book?
Well, I know Michael Oren, and I respect him and like him greatly. And obviously, he had access to President Obama that few others have had. And I think what he is doing is, as I said about another Israeli ambassador to Washington one time, he's perhaps the antithesis of the old British saying that an ambassador is someone who's sent to lie abroad for his country, because I think Oren is a truth teller. Some of his opinions I might not agree with, but he is telling the truth about what has happened inside the Obama administration and what is said and what he thinks is believed and so forth. Some of his theories may be hypotheses, but I think he's an honest and a reliable reporter, and he's telling it as it is. It's sad because we want a strong U.S.-Israel relationship. I believe the basic relationship is sound and bipartisan, but there have been a lot of tremors in the force in this administration.
Now, as you know, the UN Committee on Gaza has suggested that Israel may have committed war crimes. Do you believe that the Obama administration will take action to keep their report from being passed to the Security Council?
I surely hope so. I believe they will, because in fact this report is unsubstantiated, and it flies in the face of those generals and other officers like Colonel Richard Kemp, who said no nation in history, armed forces have done as much to protect against collateral damage to civilians.
Yeah, they were completely dismissive of different techniques that are unprecedented, such as the roof knocking technique.
Oh, yes. I don't understand that. I think it's completely unfair, and I agree with some of those spokesmen who say that this whole commission was set up in a biased fashion and it's had a succession of less than brilliant or exemplary leaders. And so I think this is another failure by the UN, sadly, in this respect.
Now, your organization is also opposed to the signing of a long-term nuclear deal with Iran. How do you see such a pact as manifesting itself?
Well, as the news is now being reported, there may not even be an agreement because of the Iranian parliament and the Ayatollah's objection to reasonable requirements from the P5+1. But as we have seen, this agreement does not stop the production of nuclear weapons, which was the basic objective, and it doesn't even begin to address the other issues that are outstanding with Iran. It's not just what's in their arsenal, but what's in their hearts and minds and what they're freely expressing, what's on their lips, They are threatening genocide. They're threatening to eliminate Israel and threatening to attack America, the great Satan. And in addition, they're spreading terror. They're extending their hegemony throughout the Middle East and beyond. And there's just a whole, and they're oppressing their own people and imprisoning Americans and others. And so this regime has just a litany of violations of international law and norms. All of those things should be addressed.
Well, President of CPAC, Richard Hellman, as always, thank you very much for being our guest in IBA News, and good luck with your mission.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you.
If Israel and Germany managed to forge a good relationship after the trauma of the Holocaust, then no political conflict is intractable. That was the message from visiting German President Norbert Lammert, who addressed the Knesset during commemorations for 50 years of diplomatic relations between the two countries. He was introduced by Knesset Speaker Yuli Edelstein, who called Germany a true friend of Israel that stands at the side of the Jewish people in the fight against anti-Semitism, as well as boycotts and propaganda against the state. Lammert called the Knesset the beating heart of the only functioning democracy in the Middle East, and also told the lawmakers that, similar to many Germans, he holds a deep connection to the state. While speaking about the peace process, the German leader called for serious discussions between Israel and the Palestinians, but also underscored the message that there can only be sustainable peace if Israel's security needs are met. In the past, there have been Knesset speakers who voiced objection to leaders from Berlin making speeches in German to the plenum, although today's address was well received. Russian President Vladimir Putin hosted Shimon Peres at the Kremlin, where the former president thanked him for Moscow's clear opposition to Iran's acquisition of nuclear weapons. Other topics on the two leaders' agenda included regional terrorism and bilateral relations between the two states. Peres told Putin that he is valued as an important friend of Israel and the Jewish people, and Putin described ties with Israel as close and important. Prime Minister Netanyahu addressed the nation's strategy for cybersecurity at the 5th Annual International Conference on the matter, telling those gathered in Tel Aviv that the new IDF cyber force is taking the lead.
And we are eager to build capacities that endure and develop in order to have the cutting-edge needs that we need for national defense. Let me say something about defense and cyber. The most difficult question is, where do you draw the fence? Do you draw it around a company? Do you draw it around an airbase or a power plant? And the answer is yes and no. Yes, because you need it in every one of these installations, facilities, or services. No, because it's not enough. But how far do you go? Where do you draw the fence? And if somebody punctures that fence, what do you do about it? Who do you tell? How do you prepare in advance? Who do you share this information with? What do you do about it? These are exceedingly complex questions, and there are no obvious answers. And so, in the face of this uncertainty, you can basically do two things. You can do nothing. You can say, it's too complicated. I don't know what the solution is. It's fast evolving. Or you can say, we'll organize ourselves by making decisions and moving forward. We have a saying in the military, we organize ourselves in movement. God, that's a terrible translation. I'll say it in Hebrew. Mistadrim toch kedei tnuah. That means you move, you decide where you're going, and you sort of get the forces, the vehicles, moving alongside as you decide a direction. We've decided on these two directions. I think they're monumental decisions. We may be ahead of most countries. We may be ahead of all countries, but we're moving. And we can see the change that is developing once we've decided what we're doing.
Palestinian administrative detainee Khader Adnan has passed the 50-day mark in his hunger strike against his imprisonment. Palestinian officials and family members held a solidarity meeting in Ramallah yesterday to demand the release of the 37-year-old resident of the West Bank town of Araba. Adnan's supporters say that he's been refusing all food and drinking only water since his incarceration. Palestinian officials claim all appeals made on his behalf have been met with apathy and disrespect and are accusing Israeli authorities of intending to kill him. During a previous detainment in 2012, Adnan maintained a hunger strike for 66 days, which is the longest ever recorded by such a protest by a Palestinian security prisoner. The army says that he is an operative of the Islamic Jihad terror faction, being held for activities that threaten regional security, although he has not been charged, stood trial, or been accused of direct involvement in terror attacks by security officials. Human rights groups are insisting that Adnan either be charged or set free.
Israel is using all kinds of measures when putting somebody in administrative detention. First of all, the whole procedure is secret. The detainee himself does not know why he is sitting in jail. He does not know what the accusations against him. He cannot defend himself because he doesn't know anything. He does not know for how long the detention is going to be. So if you look at Khader Adnan, he had 6 months and then another 6 months. So at the end of the first 6 months, he was hoping to be released, and then on the same day they announced that they're going to extend it.
In other regional news, there has been deep concern over antiquities in Palmyra since the Islamic State seized the Syrian city in May, and now the ISIS terrorists are confirming the first serious destruction of ancient relics. The radical Sunni group released before and after photographs showing the placement and detonation of explosives at 2 shrines in a 2,000-year-old UNESCO World Heritage Site they consider to be sacrilegious, and they were reduced to rubble. Syria's Antiquities Chief Abdul Ma'mun Abdul Karim is reporting that ISIS has also destroyed ancient tombs. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says that ISIS fighters have planted additional mines in the city, also known as Tadmor, but it isn't yet known if they intend to eradicate the Roman fortress city or are instead preparing to repel the advance of government troops. Following its capture of territory elsewhere in Syria and Iraq, the Islamic State has blown up dozens of statues and shrines of other faiths that it deems to be pagan. United Nations investigators have presented a report on Syria to the Human Rights Council, documenting the devastating effect sieges by both military and rebel groups have had on civilians. The commission accused the regime of President Bashar al-Assad of targeting residents of Aleppo with near daily dropping of barrel bombs over the past year, and the use of weaponized chlorine, it says, amounts to war crimes. Insurgent shelling was also found to have caused mass casualties, and all sides may be using sarin gas. 5 separate lists of suspected war criminals have now been consolidated into one. According to the independent monitors, more than 220,000 Syrians have been killed in the 4-year conflict, 4 million have been forced to flee, and at least 420,000 others have been deprived of food and medicine, leading to malnutrition and starvation. The report was based on testimony from people on the ground, as access to Syria itself remains restricted. The former chief prosecutor for 2 UN international tribunals criticized the lack of accountability by the international community.
State are conducting investigation essentially by foreign fighters who have the nationality. In any case, they are mid or low-level perpetrators. But the high politically and military responsible for the commission of these crimes, no states are dealing with that kind of investigation.
Here at home, Jewish Agency held its annual Board of Governors meeting in Tel Aviv this week, where immigration to Israel was naturally a main topic of conversation. IBA's Eli Wogelenter was there and asked the agency's Director of Public Affairs and Communications, Igal Palmore, what Aliyah numbers he expects by the end of 2015.
At the end of the year, we expect numbers to be even bigger than last year. And last year showed a significant increase on previous years. The main sources for Aliyah in the last 3 years have been Ukraine, Russia, and France. The Ukraine and Russia, obviously, because of the war that's raging in eastern Ukraine, the international sanctions on Russia that have broke down the economy, or at least dealt a very severe blow to the economy, an uneasy situation for people in general. I must emphasize something. There has not been any perceptible anti-Semitic persecution in either country. So Jews are not coming because they are being persecuted as Jews, but because the situation in general has deteriorated in such a way that they cannot continue living there. That goes especially for eastern Ukraine. And Israel is, again, the shelter for Jews who feel displaced and homeless. This is what the Jewish Agency does. We encourage them to come to Israel. Now, there's also been a significant increase of Aliyah from France. That's a more nuanced phenomenon because everybody's been talking about anti-Semitism. It's not just that. It's the economic crisis. It's a general malaise of Jews in France and in Europe. There's also a malaise of non-Jewish French people who also move from France. There are approximately 1.5 million French expats in the world because there's a certain social and economic situation in France, so one must understand that. Surprisingly, maybe, Aliyah from countries such as Italy and Brazil has doubled, and we expect this, this tendency to continue. The reasons are local. The absolute numbers may not be impressive because we're talking about small communities, but still, in relative numbers, we are talking about a multiplication of the numbers, and that's something to be reckoned with. We're also North America, yes. The numbers are consistent and constant. I can't speak about an increase, but still over 3,000 immigrants a year. That's something that's certainly not negligible. These are quantities that we are proud of because we're not talking about people in distress. We're not talking about people fleeing from war. We're talking about people coming from a country where the Jewish community is thriving, where it enjoys rights like it never has before in history, and a Jewish community that thrives in what is an incomparable situation for Jews, no matter which country and which period in history you choose. So for people, over 3,000 people from this community to choose Israel every year, that's very significant. We're very proud of that. And of course, there are other countries that will not go into. Jewish Agency is also very instrumental in bringing over Jews from dangerous countries. We cannot speak in public about such operations, but Israel is also a shelter for people fleeing from places where they are persecuted and where their lives are in harm's way.
Now taking a look at local finance, and the shekel today increased in strength against all major foreign currencies, while share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange were down across the board. Here's a look at the afternoon numbers. The IBA weather team tells us that we can expect partly cloudy to fair conditions tomorrow, accompanied by no significant change in temperatures and the chance of a little light drizzle along the coast in the morning hours. Here's the forecast at home and abroad over the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. We hope you'll join us again tomorrow, and I'll be back at the same time. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a wonderful evening and shalom from Jerusalem.